In 1976, Estes introduced the Star Trek starter set. This set featured a simple four-fin rocket where the fins came in the form of a pre-molded plastic fin can with a diamond airfoil and a plastic nose cone that came in two halves that had to be glued together with plastic cement. The rocket was 15 inches long and just under an inch in diameter. It sported a full-body wrap that was themed on the popular Star Trek television show. In the 9 years that followed, this rocket would spawn 4 additional kits that were virtually identical, with decals and the color of the molded plastic parts being the only distinguishing features. These additional kits were the Challenger 1 in 1977, the Star Wars Proton Torpedo in 1978, the Cadet in 1979, and the Guild Highliner, inspired by the movie Dune, in 1985. Of these, only the Cadet was sold as an individual kit, with the others only available as part of an entry-level starter set. Challenger 1 was by far the longest surviving variation of the group, and as such became the most identifiable representative of the class. The Challenger 1 set appeared in every Estes catalog between 1977 and 1985, representing a very respectable run of 10 years. In contrast, the original Star Trek rocket was discontinued after only 3 years. Additionally, the Challenger 1 never changed in appearance during the time it was available. It always appeared as a white fuselage with red-orange fins and nose cone and black wraparound decals. Again, by contrast, the Star Trek rocket, though it was only sold for 3 years, underwent a color change in 1977 after only 1 year on the market. The consistency of the Challenger 1 over its 10-year release was another reason that it became iconic in the 1970s and 80s. One other variant worth mentioning would be the Scorpion, Estes kit number 1472. The Scorpion was basically a two-stage elongated version of the Challenger 1 rocket, and made use of the same fin can times 2 for each stage, and the same nose cone. It was available from 1980 through 1988, though the last 2 years were with slightly altered parts. Because in 1986, Estes stopped producing the two-piece PRP-1H nose cone, as well as the PRP-1G fin units used in the Challenger series, and that marked the end of this particular class of rocket. However, the very next year, in 1987, those parts were replaced by the very similar BNC-50Y nose cone and the 072614 fin can. With these parts, several additional close cousins of the Challenger 1 were introduced over the years. These were the Screaming Eagle starter set in 1987, the Lancer in 1988, the Athena in 1990, the America in 1991, the Pegasus in 1993, the Asteroid Hunter in 1998, and also there was a rocket called the Manta, which featured a small detachable glider. More recent examples of rockets that closely resemble the Challenger 1 design were the Scorpion in 2001, the Customizer in 2010, and most recently, the generic E2X, first introduced in 2015 and which is still currently available, definitely has that Challenger 1 family resemblance. Finally, to round out our discussion, we'll look at one more rocket that may end up becoming a future project on this channel. Back in 1980, Estes introduced a depowered Challenger 1 variant called the Challenger 2. And it was available for 6 years from 1980 to 1985. So clearly the Challenger 1 and the rockets it inspired deserve a bit of recognition in the big picture of model rocket history. Today I'm going to honor the Challenger 1 by creating a faithful reproduction of this iconic kit with 3D printed replica parts and inkjet printed decals. So, welcome to Retro Rockets, and thanks for watching. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, and welcome to the Challenger 1 build video. So the Challenger 1, you've watched the introduction by now, and you know that it was the second rocket in a series of 5 rockets that Estes did. Many more rockets were based on this design. But the reason I chose the Challenger 1 to do this clone project is because it was sort of iconic in the 70s. You know, having kind of got really into rocketry in the late 70s, mid-late 70s, and continued it into the 80s. I just remember the Challenger 1 just being in every single catalog. I always saw. I never owned one. I never actually owned one back then. So, but I did just want to do a clone of it. The main reason I picked the Challenger 1 for this project is because the fin can and the nose cone are no longer available. They're no longer being produced by Estes. So, as part of my kind of series on how to clone, I wanted to talk about what do you do in that case, and the answer is 3D printing. And so I picked the Challenger 1 specifically because A, it has parts that aren't available anymore, and B, there are model files out on the internet to where you can 3D print the parts we need, or in the case of the nose cone, something very close. So before we get started on the Challenger 1, I thought it would be fun since, as you know, the Challenger 1 was the second rocket in this series. The first rocket in this series was this guy. This is the Star Trek starter set. This was introduced in 1976, and this rocket was the first of the Challenger 1 family. And since I had one, I thought it might be fun as just kind of a little quick exercise to look at the starter kit and what's in it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at the 1976 Star Trek starter set. So I have some tape on here I gotta get off. I should have probably done this before I started filming, but it's not too bad. I use painter's tape so it doesn't tear the paper. But this box doesn't want to stay closed because, as you'll see, this isn't sealed or anything. I have some packing material in here. I'm going to turn this around. In fact, I want to take that off. Let's take that completely off. So we're not... Okay. Put it over here. Okay, so don't mind the packing material. That's just to keep everything from moving around too much. Mostly bubble wrap. So what you got in this starter set was the launch pad and launch controller. Now the launch pad for these inexpensive starter sets in the 70s was designed to fit onto the end of a 6-volt lantern battery. Now these batteries, they don't really make them anymore, but they were kind of rectangular like this and about yay high, and this would bolt onto the top of where the terminals were on the battery, and the weight of the battery would be your launch pad, and then this would obviously sit on top, and then you had your launch rod that would, well, the battery actually sat on its side, and then the launch rod would sit down inside like that. So that's how that worked. But so you had your little cap for the battery, you had your launch rod, 2-piece launch rod. Remember now I think the Alpha 3 starter set that I opened on my first video had it in 3 pieces, but this is how they used to come. They used to be in 2 pieces, which I prefer because it's one less joint to have the launch leg catch on. Actually, it's better if you just get a 1-piece rod. Here's the launch controller. Just a yellow, plain kind of launch controller, no frills. Here's your launch rod cap in here. I'm not going to open that. Well, I guess it's already open. Never mind. For some reason I was thinking that was sealed. Here's your standoffs. These are designed just to sit off. Well, that's not a standoff. I don't know what that is, actually. Never seen one of those. It's a solid little plug of plastic. I have to read the instructions. But this was the launch rod standoff. Your launch rod safety cap. And here is the launch controller, or the body of the launch controller. It was assembled like that. You got your continuity light, your launch button, your safety key goes in there. And that was pretty much it for the launch pad. So for the rocket, you got a body tube. I've got all this kind of protected. Got the body tube here. The nose cone, I'm just going to set that in front. Now the two-piece nose cone was unique in Estes because it was one of the few nose cones that you had to glue together. And you would have used plastic model cement, and it came in two halves like this. And you just, like a plastic model, you just glued it together, and then I suppose if you were, a stickler for you'd want to fill that seam and make sure it was invisible. But that's the PRP-1 G or H. I forgot which one's the nose cone and which one's the tail. But that was the nose cone. And then we had this fin can, which was a 4-fin. It has a slight diamond airfoil on the fins. And if you notice, it has a slight kind of a, the top and the bottom edge are sort of trapezoidal, I guess is the word I'm looking for, so that'd be like a trapezoidal shape there. And this are no longer available. So these two parts are what we are going to 3D print. And that's kind of the main drive of this video. So anyway, so other things you got were your engine mount assembly, engine hook, parachute shroud lines. Here's the rest of the launch controller. Here's all the bulb, the launch bulb, some of the contact plates. There's your safety key, your screws, that kind of stuff. Here's your launch leads. And then lastly you had your little blast deflector plate. Look how small that is. It's only a little bigger than a silver, just a little bigger than a silver dollar. But I think now they're like gigantic. But anyway. And then we have some very old rocket engines here. These are A83, and what else we got in here? A B64. So two A83s and a B64 model rocket engines. Those have got to be like almost 40 years old. I wouldn't trust them now. So these are these are collector's items. They won't ever be lit. And then pulling that out. So then you have your instructions. Nice detailed instruction book, full size. I won't go through the whole thing here, but it's pretty standard. Has instructions for the launch pad, launch controller, and the rocket all in one book. And then a little technical section at the back. So it's actually a pretty thick little guide there. Then you have the roll-on decal. This would have been the body wrap. This would go over this. So there was no painting required on this rocket, unless you wanted to, repaint the yellow. As far as the color match, it was pretty good, pretty close. Looks like the roll-on is a little brighter. So you had that, and then they gave you a little bit of recovery wadding. Back in the 70s and 80s, a launch set or a starter set contained everything you needed to fly. Nowadays they have launch sets, which have everything. They have the launch pad and the rocket basically, and the controller, but they don't include the wadding. They don't include the motors. That's basically what they don't include. And then let's see, we had a educator request, a little pamphlet on rocketry. Man, we used to get, there was a lot of these, we used to have tons of these. And it basically was just a little mini catalog. You can kind of see little excerpts from the catalog. And then, interestingly enough, one of the things that featured in here is the Challenger 1. So, this particular set, let me just finish here. You got the shock cord mount, which we don't use these. and then some little instruction sheet on how to put together your launch rod. So, interestingly, the hole is slightly offset. So you had to make sure you lined it up correctly so you can get this lip. Not sure why they did that. But anyway. So anyway, yeah, going back to the decal here. So this particular set would have been from 1977 or 1978, because in 1976, when this rocket was first introduced, instead of a yellow and red decal, it was purple and yellow. So they did do a color change. They did change the color scheme on the rocket after a year. Not sure why. Haven't heard any kind of history on that, but so we know this one was from the last 2 years of the release, and that's basically what you got in the Star Trek starter set. So what we are going to do next is, before we can get started on our build, we're going to have to go over to the computer, and we're going to have to get our instructions and our model file for the fin and the nose cone, and then I will walk you through kind of the way you would download the model file. We will go into what's called a slicer program and set up the 3D print and export it to a file that you would actually load onto your printer. Now, what I'm not going to do, I'm not going to get really heavy into the 3D printing how-to. There's tons of videos out there on how to print. They can be specific to the type of printer you own. I use a resin 3D printer for model rockets because I have a type of resin that's pretty hard. It's almost as hard as plastic. And I find that the resolution of the resin 3D printing is much better than the filament printing. The filament printing, you'll see the layers usually if you look really close, whereas in the resin printing, it looks like it was molded. It actually looks like it was molded because the layers, it has layers as well, but they're so fine, they're microscopically thin, and you just get a better look. Now, if I was printing something large, then I might go with a filament printing, or if I needed something to be very high strength, I would use filament printing. But for this project, we're going to do this on a resin printer. Full disclosure, I've actually already printed the parts, so I'm not going to film the actual process of it printing, but I will take you through everything up to loading the file onto the printer. So with that in mind, the next step, let's go over to the computer and start downloading our data. So the first thing we're going to want to do for the Challenger 1 is to figure out our body tube size. So to do that, we're going to do the exact same thing that we did for the X-ray and the Alpha. We're going to go to the Estes body tube guide or body tube reference. Again, you just search on Estes body tube reference PDF. You'll get this search result pretty near the top, I would think. And when you click on it, it should directly open up the PDF file. Again, thank you to John Brahm for his excellent research in compiling this reference. This is an absolute essential reference if you are cloning old Estes rockets, because it's just a plethora of information. So what you want to do is you'll go ahead and do a Control F and search for Challenger, and I happen to know that we aren't going to find it here, but I want to show you. So if we hit Challenger, we're going to get the Challenger 2. Remember, that was the depowered variant that Estes came out with, and the second hit is also Challenger 2. So the reason for this is because one of the shortcomings, and maybe the only shortcoming of this reference, is that if a kit was only ever available as part of a starter kit, for some reason it's not included in this reference. And
unfortunately, the Challenger 1 was never offered as a standalone kit. It was only ever offered as part of the Challenger 1 starter kit. And any other rocket like that, the Vagabond, there's a few rockets out there that were only ever offered as part of starter kits. They don't show up in this reference. However, in our case, we know that Estes did offer the kit as a standalone kit, but it was named Cadet, so with a K. So if we look up the Cadet, we see that kit number 1328 is on this reference. It's exactly the same rocket, just had a different decal and different colored plastic parts. But we can use this because we're only interested in the size of the body tube. So we see here that we have a WBT50W, which white body tube, WBT, and it's 9.5 inches long. So I don't know if you can see this. Let me pull this up a little bit. There we go. That's probably easier. So the Cadet WBT50, so we know it's a BT50, and we don't really care whether it's white or not because we're going to paint it. And we know that it's 9.5 inches long. So we're going to just take a note of that, and that's about it for the body tube. So the next thing we want to do, close out of this, next thing we're going to want to do is get the kit instructions. So we always want to have a copy of the kit instructions where we can. So we're going to do a search for, let's do Estes, type Challenger 1 instructions. And if you do that, you're going to get this result up here, hopefully again near the top. We want to click on this, and what we'll find here is the rocket. It'll take you to the rocketry forum, and somebody in the rocketry forum actually posted a complete set of scans for the Challenger 1 starter set instructions that used to come with the starter set. So that's exactly what we're looking for. So all you're going to do here is, these are actually not attached as a PDF. These are actually scanned as JPEGs. But that's okay. You just click on one. It's going to take you to Flickr, and because it's a picture, it's a photograph. And then you're just going to go over here in the corner and hit this little down arrow and download it. And then you can, print it. You can. What I did was I cropped each side so that it printed in basically 8.5 by 11. Here, I can show you that. If you look down in the corner where my camera is, I printed it so that it came out like that. So yes, there's that. One caveat with this, and this is just specific to this particular set of instructions. If we go back to the Rocketry Forum post where he posted these, as you're scanning down and you're downloading these, you'll notice that for some reason pages 3 and 14 are repeated here, and pages 4 and 13 are not in the post. So he's missing 4 and 13, but that's okay. The reason is that was just a mistake on the Rocketry Forum post. If you go back to the Flickr account and you click on these little arrows, that's going to page through the photographs on his Flickr account. You will see that we get to where is it? It's going to be, it's in here. It's where is it? There it is. This is page 4 and 13 here. So it is in there. It's just not as made part of the post. You just want to go ahead and download that one. And that will give you your instructions. So we can check that off the list. So let's go ahead and get out of that. So that leaves us with finding our model files for 3D printing as the last thing we need to do. And we're going to go to a website called Thingiverse, www.thingiverse.com. And once you go to Thingiverse, you get Thingiverse is just kind of like a a storage house for all kinds of 3D model files. It's designed for 3D printing and people that do a lot of 3D printing. And all of these are mostly free. I don't know if everything on here is free, but the stuff we're interested in is going to be free. And what you want to search for here is PRP-1, I think it's H. Nope, sorry, I was getting it wrong. It's PRP-1G, and that's going to be the fin can that we need for Challenger 1, and here you see it right here. So if we click on that, this is the Estes PRP-1G fin can, and what we want to do is we want to say download all files. You're just going to click on that. I'm not going to download this again because I've already downloaded it, but what that's going to give you is a zip file with, well, I'll go ahead and do it. I'll just go ahead and do it. So it gives you this little box. You can tip the designer. And once you do that, you're going to get this zip file. So if we open that, and you'll see you'll get files. Open up that files directory. And he's got a lot of stuff in here. And we're really only interested in FinCan Original STL, this one right here. There's a lot of variations of 3 fins, 5 fins, 6 fins, oversized with launch lug. You know, it's just, he made a lot of variations on this. So there's even some for different body tube sizes if you wanted to do an upscale. I think there's some, you know, BT60 size, or, you know, just different stuff. But we're only interested in this one that says PRP-1G FinCan Original. So that's the only one you need to extract from this zip file, and I would just recommend putting it on your desktop temporarily or in a folder where you know where it's going to be. So that's the FinCan. And then what we want to do is here is we're going to click on Jack Hydrazine, the name. I want to give full credit to Jack. I've corresponded with him on the Rocketry Forum, and I asked permission from him to use his model files as part of this video, and he was very generous in granting that permission. But I do want to give him full credit. These are outstanding model files. I have printed them already, and they fit very well, they look very well, and they print perfectly. So thank you, Jack. I appreciate all your hard work. And what's even more, if we go to his page in Thingiverse, you will see, among a lot of other things, but you'll see a lot of model rocketry related model files, and he has a whole bunch of different Estes nose cones and transitions that you can download and print and use in various cloning projects. Like he's got the nose cone for the Viper here, for the Colonial Viper, or, you know, whatever transition you might need. This looks like the nose cone for a Big Bertha or something very similar. Different fin cans. Here's one that you would use if you were going to clone the Ares SST. But the nose cone we're after, we don't have the PRP nose cone exactly, because that was something that came in 2 halves, and there is no scan of that. But one that is very, very close, and it's almost the exact same nose cone. It just comes in one piece. Is this PNC 50YR. This will be, I think it's maybe a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch longer than the PRP nose cone, but you can't really tell. It's the exact same profile, and when you get it on the tube, you're not going to notice that slightly longer dimension. So this is the nose cone we're going to do. Again, we're going to say download all files, and we're going to download that, and it counts down, it downloads it, and when you open this zip file, it's not quite as many things in it. We're interested in 2 things here: the nose cone STL and the end cap. Those are the only 2 files we need for our project. He has different sizes for different body tubes. If you wanted to do an upscale, there's one with no shoulder. I'm not sure why you would want that, but anyway, we're interested in the nose cone and the end cap. And again, I would just copy those to a folder or put them on your desktop or something so that you know where they are. Okay, so that means we have our model files. So now what do we do with the model files? We need to process the model. Before you can just send a model file to a 3D printer, you have to run it through a program called a slicer. And what the slicer is going to do is it's going to take this 3D model here, this 3D model that, like, we have a picture of it here, and it's going to make slices, like vertically from top to bottom. And in the case of a resin printer, it's going to be in the thousands of slices. Resin 3D printing is a very fine resolution print, so each layer is microscopically thin. So this nose cone is a few inches long, and it's going to have a couple of thousand slices or layers, if you want to call it that. So what the slicer does is it processes the model, it turns it into a series of layers that can be 3D printed one layer at a time. That's the way a resin 3D printer works, and I'll get more into that in a minute. So what is the name of the slicer program you're going to want? I use a program called Chitubox. And if we go back to Google, you just Google Chitubox download, you will get to this www.chitubox.com. You're going to go there. You don't want the free trial. This is for the pro version. You want to go up here to where it says Basic, Chitubox Basic, and you want to go and download the basic file. Now you're going to have to create an account when you click on this. You want the stable version, I would guess. I don't know, it's up to you if you want to try the beta, but I would always go with the stable versions. Click your operating system if you have a Mac, a Linux. I have Windows, so I would click on this, and it's going to want you to view this thing about new supported firmware. You can ignore that, just click continue. It depends on what printer you have. And then you're going to need to log in, and if you don't have an account, you just set up, it's a free account, it's no big deal. They'll probably send you some junk emails and stuff, but you know, price to pay for free software. So you're going to go ahead and log in, and once you log in, you'll be able to install the software. And I'm not going to go ahead and do that because I already have it installed. But it's a fairly straightforward process, just like installing anything else. So we're going to go ahead and kill this. And once you have the program installed, you'll get a little icon on your desktop that looks like this. It's got this little flower-shaped thing, and it says Chitubox. So you can click on Chitubox, and when you first open the program, you'll be presented with a modeling space. Now the first time you open it, you're going to want to go to Settings, and over here where you have this little this lists your 3D printers that you have. This will be blank. I have Elegoo Saturn here because that's the printer I have. That won't be there. So you click on this little add. You go to the manufacturer of your 3D printer. For instance, so mine was Elegoo, and then you select Saturn, and you hit OK, and it will add that to your list of printers. And what that does is it sets some defaults for you in your settings. So I'm going to cancel out of that, and cancel out of that. And so then you'll have a model space that is appropriate to your printer. So if you have a very large printer, your work surface will vary. So like the Elegoo Saturn's pretty good size. It has a pretty good size work area or plate. And again, I'll go ahead and I'll show this later. When we're done with this, we'll go over to my 3D printer, and I'll show you a couple of things. But so this is our printing area here that we have available. So once we have that, we're going to go ahead and open our model files. So we go here to this little 3 bars. We're going to click Open, and we're going to browse to where we have our model files. Now I just put mine on my desktop. So let's put the fin can down first. We're going to open that first. And when you open it, it's going to plop the fin can right there onto your printing surface. So you can see that you can move this thing around with a. So if I left click, it moves the whole uh, printing area around without changing an angle of anything. If I right click, I can rotate, and with the mouse I can kind of reorient it so that the view is what I want to see. So I usually like it at a little bit of an angle towards me, like that. So here's our fin can, and that's how big it will appear in relation to our print plate. So what I usually do with the fins, because we want to put some other stuff on here, I'm going to go ahead and rotate it 45 degrees so it fits on the plate a little better. And I'm just going to, oops, I do that. Reset. 45. Nope, wrong one. Reset. 45. There we go. So, and then I want to move it. I want to shift it just a little bit this way. So just move it over to the side a little bit. And you can do that with your mouse, or you can use these buttons here. So, and then I say put it on the plate to make sure I didn't move it up. And if you wanted to recenter it, you could, but with this button here. But that's pretty good. That's all we need. It'll be fine there. It'll print okay. Now, without getting too detailed into 3D printing, there's a lot of good videos out there on 3D printing. So this is not meant to be a comprehensive tutorial on 3D printing, but we are going to discuss a little bit here of what we call supports. If you can see, if I turn this on edge, you can see that the trapezoidal shape of the fin has the bottom edge kind of lifting up off the print surface. That will not print correctly just due to the way resin printing works. If you were to just send this to the printer this way, it would not print correctly. You'd end up with kind of a blob or a mess down here. And that's because this bottom edge, because it lifts away from the plate, has to be supported. And again, if you want more detail on why that is, or the different theories behind supporting different shapes, go ahead. There's tons of videos out there on YouTube about that. But just take my word for it, this will need to be supported. And what we do for supports is we're going to go up here in this corner where you see these little, looks like little rocket ships under a block. You're going to click on that, and that is your support menu. And the only thing you would need to know here is you want, for this particular project, I want medium supports. The Z lift height is going to be 5 millimeters, so that means it's going to lift the whole thing. You can see it's lifted it up 5 millimeters here, up off the surface, and that's because the supports go underneath, and they need a little room. If you left it on the surface, the supports wouldn't be they wouldn't be able to configure the supports right. So I use a density for fins of about 70%. That's this here. These other ones you can, like I said, there's videos that'll talk about all these other things here, but I'm only interested in just a few things here because this will work just fine. I've printed this before. And then you're going to want to, so we have 70%, a 5 millimeter lift, Z lift, and then you're just going to press plus all. That's going to that's going to add your supports automatically. You can add them one by one. As you can see, it'll let me place supports here. But I'm just going to do the auto supports for this because it's a very simple shape, and the auto supports works fine. And you can see now that it has these little supports. So now this will print correctly. And that's going to be all we need to do for the fin can. So the next thing we want to do is go ahead and add our nose cone. So to do that, we go back to this tab over here, and we go back to our little 3 bars, and we hit open, and we say we want the nose cone.stl. And so we open that, and now our nose cone drops onto the work surface. So I'm going to move that up, and then we're going to go ahead and might as well, while we're adding things, let's go ahead and add our end cap. And we'll we'll move him over here abouts, and that should do it. So one other thing I want to talk about is when the way 3D printing works is the plate is upside down. So this is the way your plate would look on the printer. As it prints, it's printing each layer from the bottom down to the top of the nose cone. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit here in just a second. But if you go over here to this slider bar, you can see it's going to show you each layer. It has you can display each layer here, or what it would look like at each layer. So as it's starting out, it's going to start like this. It's going to print. Each layer is going to print, and it's just going to do this as it kind of pulls itself out of the resin bath. You'll see, if you were to watch it, it takes hours, but if you were to speed it up and watch it, it would kind of look like this. So it's printing each layer from the surface of the plate out to the tip of the highest point on your model. In this case, the tip of our nose cone. As it's printing, it's using liquid resin, and because this nose cone is sealed up against this plate, as it's printing each layer, it's holding a little bit of resin inside. And what will happen is the liquid resin, when it finished printing, it would look like this, and you would have some liquid resin trapped inside the nose cone, inside the hollowed out portion of the nose cone. So what we want to do to alleviate that, now this is optional because it won't hurt anything. It just means when you break your, get this back to where I want it. It just means when you break your nose cone off of the plate, the liquid inside will pour out and you'll waste some resin. That's fine. You can do that if you don't want to do the step here I'm about to show you. It's not a lot of resin in the case of this because it's a fairly small nose cone, but it will kind of make a mess. So you want to make sure when you break these off, if you're not going to drill the hole I'm about to show you, you want to make sure you're doing this in some sort of a pan because the resin is kind of toxic. You're not supposed to let it touch your skin. It's nasty stuff. You don't want to be breathing the fumes too much, and you definitely don't want to be, getting it everywhere. So, and anyway, to get the resin to not be trapped inside the nose cone, what we can do is we can drill a hole. So we want to zoom in here to where we have this fairly good size. Get it kind of close up. We want to get directly over the top of the nose cone so that we're looking straight down on it. And get it kind of, you want it kind of big so that you can make sure it's centered pretty well. Okay, so that's pretty good. Then once you have that, you're going to go up here to this little button right here, and it says Dig Hole. So we're going to click on that. That's going to bring up a menu. We want a circular hole. We want it to be, I have these preset because I've done this before, but yours may not be set to these values, but these are the values that work pretty well for this particular nose cone. We want a diameter of that hole of about 1.5 millimeters, and we want it to be a depth of about 75 millimeters, a little under 3 inches. Perpendicular to screen, make sure keep the hole is unchecked, otherwise it's going to take your hole and place it over, it's going to dig the hole and then place that little blob that it dug out over it. We don't need it. We don't care about that. So that will be blank. We go ahead and click Add a Hole. You should get this little green dot here, and you want to make sure that is perfectly centered over your nose cone and click it. And now hit Escape to get out of that. And now when we let me get out of this here, let's pull back a little bit, you can see that it drilled a little hole in the tip of the nose cone. And what that's going to do is that's going to allow our resin to drain out. So let me get this reconfigured here. Oops, I'm moving stuff around I don't want to be. Let's go back to where we were. So So we're back to kind of where we were at here. And I'm going to tilt this just a little bit more towards you so you can see that hole. And then as we pull our layers down, you can see that hole is now all the way through to the open part of the nose cone. And so that's going to allow that resin that would be caught inside this part to drain out. Again, this is optional. If you don't do this, just be prepared to have a little bit of resin dump out when you break this off of the plate. So, and then, this is going to be you just use putty, when we get this printed out and cured and everything, that'll fill up with putty, real easy. So it's not a big deal. So anyway, once you are ready, once we have everything configured the way we want it to, we're going to kind of come over here to this slice bar, and you're going to select slice. What this is going to do is going to take this. Now all these 3D models are sitting here. It's going to take it and construct it's going to chop this into slices. It's literally going to slice it. And once it slices it, you can look over here and see that we have 2,497 layers in our print, and that the total print time is going to be 7 hours and 39 minutes and 53 seconds. So resin 3D printing takes a while. It's a little bit slower than filament printing in my experience, and but you do get better resolution. And what you can see here now, if we pull down our slider bar, you're going to actually see this area here represents your display screen that's going to be on your printer. What's going to get shown, and what it's going to do is it's going to print from the bottom. Like this will be the very first layer that prints, layer number 1. And what this does, as the plate comes down onto your, the bottom of your resin bath, it goes all the way down to the bath, and it comes up just a fraction of a millimeter, and allows resin to, comes up, and then it presses down, and it traps a microscopically thin layer of resin between the bottom of the bath and the plate. And then the bottom of the bath is transparent, and underneath it is a screen, and the screen is going to flash this pattern for your exposure time, which in our case is 2.5 seconds here per layer. Actually, your bottom exposure, because they want it to be a little more cured, is a longer. So I'm sorry, this is bottom exposure time is 30 seconds. But without getting into that, again, there's videos on this you can go watch. But basically, for each layer, it's going to display the pattern at that layer, and it's going to cure the resin for that layer. It's going to pull up, it's going to come down again just slightly higher, and then it's going to print the next layer. So you can see as each layer prints, it builds. Oh, you can watch it building over here on the screen, and that's the way 3D printing, resin 3D printing works. So now that we have our model file sliced, we want to select save, and then you can give it a name. It's going to be saved as a CTB file. CTB files are the actual files that you're going to take over to your printer on a thumb drive. So you want to save this somewhere, give it a name. In my case, I would name it like here. I've already done this, so we'll just name it Challenger 1 CTB. And if you select save, like I said, you won't get this, but I've already done it once, so it's asking if I want to replace it. I'll just say yes, and then it starts to write the file, and you can see the progress bar down here at the bottom. It takes a little while to write. There's a lot of information there. You get 2,500 layers that it's got to write information for. So it tracks across there. It's pretty quick. Now, the taller your item is, the more layers you're going to have. So if I was only printing this little end cap, for instance, my print time would be a lot less, because it's only going to have however many layers are in that little cap. So once that's done, you're basically done, and we can go back. You hit the back button here. It'll take you back to your project. Then if you want to save this, because you might want to print it again, you can save project. And then you'd want to save all models, not just the selected. If I did the selected one, it'd be the nose cone, because that's what I have selected. But we want to save all models in the project. And then we could save that as Challenger 1 Chitu box. And hit save. And now it's going to save that project for you. So that if you need to come back, something goes wrong with your print, you know, you can come back and open your project, make whatever changes you need to make, and print it again, slice and print it again. So that is basically it in a nutshell for how you would 3D print the parts for the Challenger 1. Again, this is not meant to be an in-depth tutorial on 3D printing. These parts are fairly easy to print. They're not too complicated. If you start to get into figures and stuff, the supports get a lot more complicated. And again, there's tons of videos out there on that. But for rocket parts, it's a fairly straightforward process. And so anyway, you would go and now you could close Chitu box. And you would end up with your model files, your CTB files. You would put those onto a your CTB file, I should say. You're not going to have files, you'll have one file. And that's this guy right here. And you would take this file and put it onto a thumb drive. If I make that bigger, you can see it. I'm not sure how well this is showing up on YouTube here. But this is your file. You would take this CTB file, put it on a thumb drive, something just, you know, kind of like this. And then that thumb drive will plug directly into your printer, and depending on the type of printer you have, you'll have a menu system there to get your print going. So that's basically it. We're going to go back to the workbench now. I've already printed these guys. And now we can, once we have our 3D parts printed, one thing about the 3D printing, by the way, they cure with UV light, and you're going to want to cure them a little. Once you get the parts off of the printer, you're going to have to, again, watch some videos out there on this. You're going to want to scrub the excess resin off with some alcohol. Use like a soft toothbrush, and then you're going to want to put them in under a UV light to finish curing, and it might take just a few minutes under a UV light to finish hardening the resin. That's the last, actually the last step. And then once you have your hardened parts, we can go ahead and start construction. So we'll go back to the workbench now, and I will show you the parts that I've printed, and then we can get started building the rocket. So I'll see you over at the bench. All right, real quickly, I just wanted to show you my 3D printer. This is the Elegoo Saturn. It is the first generation Saturn. There is now, I believe, a Saturn II that's been available. So I've had this for a couple of years. It does really well. Does everything I want it to do. It prints high res, full HD resolution. So you see, you would say that's a 2K printer. Anyway, I'll just quickly show you what the parts of it are. So this red cover here, most of the printers will come with some kind of a opaque cover. That's just to protect if you leave resin in your resin bath here. It just helps keep the UV light off of it so that it doesn't cure on you. You don't want to leave the resin in your bath very long. But if you're doing, you know, consecutive prints or something, you might have reason to leave it in there. So anyway, so the parts of the printer, here's your build plate. This is your resin bath here, and this comes off. This has two screws that hold it on, and I'm going to show you. So the resin sits in this bath here, and it's the bottom of it, as you can see, is transparent. And what happens is this here is a screen, a display screen, just like a tablet.
And as you remember, when we were looking at the Chitu box, when we would go down through the layers, each layer would be the silhouette of that layer with a black outline, and the layer, the part that you're going to print, would be in white. And what would happen for each layer, this part comes down into the resin trough and compresses just a very thin layer of resin underneath the plate, or underneath the last layer printed, and that this display will display that silhouette of your part, and the white light from that silhouette cures that layer of resin that's trapped between the bottom of this and the next layer up. So and then as just kind of demonstrate this. So as it's down here on the getting exposed, then it pulls up, then it comes back down and traps another layer of resin, then it goes up, traps the next layer, and kind of works its way up until your print reaches the last layer, which is the top. So this here is the build plate. This one's a pretty good size one, although I think they make bigger ones now. Elegoo, I think, has one called the Jupiter that's even bigger. They seem to name their printers after planets. But yeah, it's just a metal build plate. So when your print is done, the printer will come up and it will be just sitting like that over the bath, and you'll see your part dangling from the plate. So you're going to take your plate off, you're going to go over to a pan or something and use a chisel or some kind of flat edge instrument to kind of pry off the part from the plate. And again, I'm just going to remind you, if you don't drill that hole in the nose cone, that's the part where I'm saying if you pop that nose cone off, there's going to be liquid resin inside the nose cone, and it'll make a mess if you don't have it contained in a pan or something. Ask me how I know. So yeah, that's what I did the first time I printed that nose cone. It happened to me. So anyway, so yeah, that's the Elegoo Saturn printer. That's kind of the way the process works. And the resin comes in these jars like this. So I have this ABS-like photopolymer resin. ABS is a type of plastic, so that's why I'm saying the type of resin you want to use for rocket parts is definitely the ABS resin. It has really good strength and flexibility. It's not as brittle as some of the other types of resin you can buy, and it works great. So exposes great. I haven't had any. I had one or two failed prints, but that was because when I was printing figures, I didn't do the supports right. But as far as rocket parts, they're pretty simple, and I've never had an issue with those. So anyway, just wanted to show you the printer, and now we'll go ahead and get back to the workbench and continue our build. So here we are back at the workbench, and now that you have your 3D models, your model files, you can do a couple of things. If you own a resin 3D printer, obviously you're just going to go ahead and print them. If you do not own a resin 3D printer, there are services online that you can send the model file to, the CTB files to, and they will print your part and mail it to you for a nominal fee. So either way, you should have access to these parts. So I have printed out the parts. I have put together my little pseudo kit here. And by the way, all the other parts you need to build the Challenger 1 are very generic rocket parts. Body tube, parachute, shock cord, engine mount, all that stuff. So I've got all that stuff assembled here, so we'll go ahead and take a quick look. Starting with the body tube, it's just a BT50. This is a standard 18-inch length BT50 that we will cut down to 9.5 inches. And here is the fin unit that I have printed out. Let's see if I can get that closer to you so you can get a good look at it. You can see that it came out very nicely, and it's sturdy. It looks just like a styrene plastic part, and completely 3D printed, accurate, and ready to go. And same with the nose cone. So this nose cone, obviously, as I stated before, it isn't an exact copy of the PRP nose cone from the Challenger kit, but it is so close, it is virtually indistinguishable. I don't think anybody's going to notice that it's 3/32 or an 1/8 inch too long. The profile is almost exactly the same as the PRP nose cone, and I think it's as good as we're going to get. So again, printed out, looks very nice, very smooth, just like it was molded. Very happy with that. So we have that, and like I said, everything else here is pretty standard. So we're going to have an engine mount assembly. I borrowed this from another rocket and put the Kevlar in there. Then we've got our nylon shock cord that is fully replaceable. Let's see, we have a parachute, the older style Estes that you have to cut out. This will be a 12-inch parachute. For nostalgic reasons, I wanted to use one of the older ones. And then our screw eye, which, okay, so going back to the nose cone for a second, we printed the cap and the nose cone separately, right? So the cap just fits into the end of the nose cone. But because the resin, while it is strong, I don't completely trust it to hold up to the full weight of an ejection charge being, pulled on, the screw eye pulling when the shock cord goes taut. So what we'll do is we'll put a little piece of plywood in there. We'll cut out a little piece of plywood to reinforce that. So, and then the screw eye will go into that, and then that will all go into the end of the nose cone like so. So I haven't got the plywood piece yet, but we'll add that later. And then the only other thing that's, and then I just made the little placard. The only other thing that's missing is the decals, and we will print those when we get there, because I'm gonna kind of show a little bit of that on camera, the process of finding those and printing them out to the correct size. So anyway, first order of business is we're going to go ahead and get out our cutting guides, and we're going to cut a 9.5 inch length of body tube. So I will bring the camera in closer, and I will do that next. Okay, we are going to interrupt this build just for a quick minute here, because I just received a box in the mail today from Estes. So you can see the Estes tape on there. And just for fun, I thought it would be fun. I know what this is, but I thought it would be fun to just open it on camera and share it with you. Just a little break from the building action here. So we'll get our hobby knife and open her up. I was fortunate enough to be able to take advantage of a couple of coupons and get a very good discount on these items. A very good discount. And thank you to Kevin Duncan with Kevin's Models and More for alerting me to those coupons. Go check out his website when you have a chance. He's got a ton of content, a lot more than I do. And in fact, he just built a Mars lander, which is an outstanding build video. Something I hope to do on this channel one day, but it'll be a couple of projects down the road. So anyway, in our box we have the Estes Super Orbital Transport. 1, 2, and 3. I ordered duplicates just because I might want to trade one, I might build one, I might keep one. I never know. So it's a neat rocket, so I wanted to have a couple of them. And then the last thing in here, well, not the last thing, but the last kit that's in here is a Estes Saturn 1B, and this will almost certainly be a project on our channel coming up in the not too distant future. And then we got, as a freebie, we got some StarTech igniters. That was just something they throw in for free. And then another copy of the 2022 Estes catalog. So it's always nice to get one of those. Nice to have a couple of copies. And then a little card inside that says thank you for your order, and my order was packed by Amy. Thank you, Amy. I appreciate your efforts here, as everything looks to be correct and in very good shape. So anyway, so thank you for indulging me with that for a little bit. We'll get back to our build now, and we're going to go ahead and cut that body tube. So now we have everything we need here for marking our body tube and getting it cut. So we're going to take our ruler and mark off 9.5 inches, which, if we can get it just as close as we can get it, right about there. We'll mark it in a few places so we can make sure our cutting guide's on straight. Maybe one more. 9.5, right there. Okay. So now, as I mentioned in previous videos, these cutting guides, when you put them on the tube, if I were to just throw this on here and tighten it down, it still slides around a little bit too much for me. This could move while you're, if you're pressing against it with the razor blade. It just has a little too much play in it. So the way you can fix that is very simple. You take the side with the little leaves on it here. Just take some painter's tape or masking tape, and you're just going to put it over the leaves. And what this will do is it just adds that little bit more thickness to them, so that when the ring comes down, it's going to compress it just a little bit tighter against the body tube, and you'll have a very snug fit. So now when we come together, get it through the it's already kind of tight just getting it on there. So move that right up to our lines. Bring our outside tube over, compress, stay on our lines, and that isn't going anywhere. It's nice and firm now. And we are right up against our marks. So now with that in place, I'm going to kind of use this to keep us kind of level there. It's just a sanding block. I'm going to open up a brand new, when I cut body tubes, I try to use a new razor. Razors are cheap. You can get 100 of them for about $8. Last you quite a while. But you want a nice clean cut, so I almost always start with a new one. So anyway, the process here is pretty simple. Just going to press our blade against the cutting guide and just slowly work our way around. It might take a few passes. In fact, you don't want to try to do it all at once. If you get greedy, sometimes you can get a rougher cut. If you just take it slow and easy, you'll get a nice clean cut. Work your way around. Oh, there we go. We're already getting there. Okay. Just a little bit further. And we are through. Okay, so got a little bit of right. Come on, last little bit. Don't want to tear it. We're already hanging on still. Got a little bit hanging on somewhere. Probably on the inside. We don't want to tear that inside up too bad. Okay. So there we have it. One 9.5-inch body tube. So set that aside and take this off. You can leave your tape on for the next time. Okay, so, and that's our scrap piece. So the next thing we need to do is, just like last time, we've got to fill the spiral lines. Now, I've gone back and forth on whether just to do this with the primer or to try to pre-fill it with some kind of filler. I don't think I'm going to use the wood filler on this, but I do think I am going to use something new. I'm going to try something that I have here. This is a product called Mr. Surfacer. It's kind of a it's a kind of a filler primer that is used in plastic models. A jar like this is like $5.50, and just brush it. You know, just apply it via brush onto the spiral lines just to get them filled up a little bit before we put the primer coat on, just so we don't have to use so many coats of primer and do a lot more sanding. So I'm going to do that off camera because that's just kind of tedious, but I'll come back before I start sanding just to show you what it looks like. You can see I have started to paint the Mr. Surfacer over the spiral lines, and what I wanted to illustrate here is I'm going to go ahead and use a piece of scrap body tube. You always want to save your scrap pieces of body tube because it really will come in handy, because if you're holding this and trying to paint the spirals, eventually you're going to get down to the end and it's going to get tricky to hold, you know, because you don't want to put your fingers on where you've painted and get fingerprints. So what I did was I just took a coupler, took my spare piece of body tube, and now I have a holder. So we'll just go ahead and do the last few inches of this filler, and then we can set it aside to dry. Now we might go ahead, because the filler shrinks a little bit, we might go ahead and do 2 coats. But I won't do both coats on camera. The nice thing about this stuff that I'm seeing is it's a little thinner than the wood filler, and because we're dealing with such a fine body tube spiral line, the thinner filler is soaking into that groove just a little better, and I think we're going to end up with a much better fill on it. There's lots of methods to fill these body tube spirals. I know Kevin at Kevin's Models and More likes to do a method where he sprays on the primer and then wipes it off a few times, and that just gets the primer down into the groove. It's kind of the same principle as this. I'm just kind of applying it with a brush, and we're going to sand it off because we want to rough up the tube a little bit anyway. So anyway, that's got it. So we'll just put this aside to dry overnight, and then we'll come back and sand that smooth. If I see it shrinking back into the groove a little bit, like I said, I might just go over it real quick with another coat. And once we get it filled in, we'll get our first coat of primer on it. Okay, so the primer, the Mr. Mr. Surfacer went on really well. It dried really nice and was very, very sandable. So I am basically going to kind of retract a recommendation I made in one of my earlier videos to use the wood filler for filling body tube seams. Maybe for the heavy duty, high power rockets that have the big, 1/8 inch wide seam lines in them, this might still be a good choice. But for the Estes tubes, because the lines are so fine on those body tubes, what I found with the wood filler is that the granularity of the wood filler is much higher than the Mr. Surfacer. This has much more of a, you can call it a creamy consistency. And as such, when you brush it on, the filler settles into those tube lines, and even though they're very, very fine, when you go to sand it, it doesn't pull the filler out of the tube lines. Like with the wood filler, a lot of times I would find that when I go to sand it, the sandpaper would just kind of pull the filler right out of the little shallow fine lines on these Estes tubes. But what I have here, maybe I'll put up a picture here, but you can see that I sanded it, and then what's left behind is just, you can see that it's just very nicely filled where the seam lines were. So my guess is that this will probably only take a single coat of primer, and I'm gonna test that theory right after this, and we'll come back. So we have our gray primer on our main body tube, and I'm very happy with how that looks. The seam lines are gone. It did take 2 coats of primer to fully conceal any indication of a seam line or a slight little bump where the Vista Surfacer was sanded down. But anyway, and part of it was when I was, after I put the first coat on and I was walking back into the house, I accidentally brushed the tube against one of the branches that was sticking out on a bush that's near our front door, and so it had a little bit of a kind of a blemish in the paint coat there, so the primer coat. So I had to sand that out, and I would have had to use 2 coats anyway, just to hide that. So, but we're done with that. It looks good. We're ready to get this sanded smooth, and then we will get the white primer on. We can do that inside because it's just a smaller can. And at the same time we're going to white primer the tube. We're also going to white primer our nose cone and fin unit. And that's about it. I am going to go ahead and mask off the shoulders on the fin and the nose cone. Just because the fit is really nice in the tube with this, and I don't want to do anything to really mess with that fit. So I don't want any paint to make that any tighter, because I'm just really happy with the fit there. So anyway, that's going to be next, and so I'll bring you over to the paint booth and we can get the white primer on there. Okay, so we are here at the spray booth. We have our body tube, fin, and nose cones all ready to spray. So I'm going to go ahead and mask up and start spraying. And as always, for our final primer coat, I'm using the Tamiya Fine Surface Primer, the white. It also comes in gray. But anytime you're going to have a red or a bright color, red, orange, yellow, you want to have a white undercoat for it so it'll pop more. So this is what we're going to use, and let's get going. It's very important if you're going to spray inside, get a good mask.
move this stuff out of the way.
Okay, that's going to do it for the first coat. I'll probably put it 2 or 3 or 1 or 2 more coats on. We'll see how it looks after another coat. That might be all it needs. I did notice on the fin unit that there is a little bit of a vertical line that I didn't catch from the 3D printing process that's going to need to be filled. So yeah, when that dries, I'll bring the camera over to the workbench and we'll take a good look at that. But we're going to have to get that filled up. Okay, so real quick here, while I was waiting for the the fine primer coat to dry, I decided to go ahead and revisit my idea about using a block of wood to reinforce the nose cone. And I thought about that and I said, well, that's just a lot of trouble to try to cut a piece of plywood and make it circular so that it fits exactly inside there. Really all you need to do is when you insert the screw eye is to reinforce it with some epoxy. That'll work as good as a block of wood, and it's just going to be a lot easier to get in there. And so that's what I've done here. As you can see, I use JB Weld because JB Weld has better adhesion to metal, and since our screw eye is metal, I opted to just use a little JB Weld epoxy. I mixed it up and just kind of poured it in the cup there around the screw eye, and once that hardens, our screw eye will be nice and set in there, and the resin will have the epoxy to reinforce it. So anyway, just wanted to show you that real quick. So I went ahead and filled these little grooves up. I'm not sure where those came from. They might be a printing artifact. I might have accidentally touched this to some kind of sharp edge or something when I was getting it off of the plate. I don't know, but I didn't notice them until I hit the fins with a primer coat. At any rate, they're very easy to fill. I just used some of this Vallejo plastic putty. This is my kind of putty that I use for when I do plastic modeling. It works great, and I've just got it on there. Gonna go ahead and let that dry, get it sanded. May have to, sometimes it takes 1 or 2 applications because this does have a tendency to shrink back a little bit. But once we get that groove filled in, we'll go ahead and continue on with our next coat of fine surface primer. Okay, so I am finally satisfied with the state of the finish primer on all 3 pieces. Our fin looks really good. We've got the little defects that I found filled in. On the fin unit, I did go ahead and decide to use some of the filler primer on this after sanding the finish primer I had on there back a little ways. I was just seeing a little bit of, tiny bit of ridging from the 3D printing process. It was ever so slight, but it was showing up just a little more than I wanted it to. So I threw a couple of pretty healthy coats of the filler primer on there and sanded that back, and that took care of the ridges. So anyway, so there was that. The nose cone was fine as is. It looks good. Only just needed another light coat of the finished primer, and that's good to go. And the body tube looks great. No seam lines visible. So the next thing we're going to do is put our color coat on. And for the body tube, not surprisingly, we're just going to stick with our old tried and true gloss white Krylon. Have really good success with that. Actually, I've never had a problem with it. For the nose cone and fin, the closest thing I could find to the original molded plastic color of the Challenger 1 is this, from currently available paint, is this Rust-Oleum Satin Fire Orange. It's a satin coat. Obviously it's not a gloss coat, but since we're going to be putting a final coat of the Pledge floor gloss over the whole thing when we get our decals on, this will gloss up. So no problem there. I was just mostly concerned with getting the color, and then again, this was the closest thing I could find. It's not too far off. If you look at the artwork here, it's pretty close. So I think it'll be close enough. So anyway, that's going to be the next step. We're going to go ahead and get our color coats on, and once that's all done, we can go ahead and start construction. And the construction isn't going to be much on this. All we're really doing is putting the engine mount, the Kevlar shock cord, and the parachute. That should go pretty quick. And then we'll be on to decals, and decals will be a little bit of a project because we're going to go and try to find the decals online. I know where they are, but we're going to go download the decals and size them and print them out ourselves. So we're going to be doing that from scratch, and I want to show more of that process. So yeah, and then that'll be the last step. So we're getting close. Alright, I have finally got a coat of paint on here that I am happy with. The white went on very easily, as it always does, and true to form, we did have a little trouble with the Rust-Oleum. We had some orange peel here on the nose cone that I had to wet sand out, and also a little area on the fin. One of the fins had some orange peel on it, which also wet sanded out without a whole lot of difficulty. But it just seems like, I never have those issues with the Krylon, and I have about a 50-50 success rate with the Rust-Oleum. But I am very happy with the color. The color is exactly what I was hoping for, and about the only thing we got to do now is to install our engine mount, glue the backpack, or glue the base of our nose cone in, and get our shock cord installed. So this is for the harness, and then we've got the elastic for the shock cord. So as far as the launch lug goes, I haven't decided. I usually leave the launch lug off of these rockets, at least until I'm ready to fly them. If I decide I'm going to make a flyer out of it, I'll probably permanently attach the launch lug. Otherwise, I'll just tape it on when I fly it. I just like the look of it without the launch lug. And then after that, all that's left is decals, and we're done. So the next thing I'll do is go ahead and bring in the camera, and we'll get going on installing our motor mount and getting our shock cord harness installed. So now we're going to go ahead and construct our motor mount. Now with these rockets that have these plastic fin units, it's important that you don't construct the entire motor mount all at once, because you have to kind of install the tube around the motor mount in order to get things. There's a sequence that's involved. You can't just build the motor mount and slide it into the back of the fin unit, because it's not set up for that. So what we're going to do is we're going to install the hook and the retainer ring, the hook retainer ring, and the forward centering ring, or I'm sorry, the aft centering ring, my bad, one with the slit in it. And then we'll also put in our engine block, and we're going to leave off the forward centering ring until we have, until we're ready to install it into the back of the fin unit. So with that in mind, we're going to just briefly put our forward centering ring on to give us the location of our engine hook slit here in the body tube. So I just like to have it right up against that, so it doesn't matter where, as long as it's, it doesn't matter where on the circumference, just as long as it's kind of the right distance from the end. So we got that, and just kind of pop that in there like so, and that's what you're looking for with that step. Okay, so now we're ready for glue. So we just need a little bit of glue for this, not too much. And I always say that, and I always make too much glue, and I waste epoxy. And epoxy's expensive, so. That's, I don't know if that's too much or not. Already looks like too much. And I don't like that. That looks like I got a little too much of the, what is that? Doesn't even say which one is which. Is this the hardener, or is this the, yeah, this is the hardener. It's got too much of the epoxy and not enough hardener. Okay. That's pretty close. Now I take our toothpick, we give this a good mix. One thing I like about using the other epoxy, oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank on the name. I hate this. I can't think of things. The JB Weld. Gosh, why can't I think of that? Anyway, one thing I like about using the JB Weld is that it's once you blend it into that gray, you know that with the color that the blend is right. But when the epoxy is clear like this, you just kind of have to make sure you mix it for about a minute. course, this is 5-minute epoxy, so we don't want to mix it too long or we'll cut down on our usability time here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and throw just a little bit of epoxy down underneath this hook. Alright, bring that down. And I'll put the hook about halfway between the start of the hook and the end of the tube. Sorry, I'm kind of drifting off camera here. I don't mean to do that. Okay, that's pretty good. I take our nylon hold down ring here, slide her down, center up the ring, wipe off our excess epoxy, put that there to dry. Keep a paper towel handy. Okay. And now before we start losing our working time on our epoxy, we're going to try to get this the aft ring on. Keep wanting to call the aft ring the front ring, I don't know why. Also on this one, it's important not to get too close to your engine hook. You don't want to be gluing that down, so I try to keep the epoxy about 1/8 of an inch away from it. So, alright, that's pretty good. Alright. Alright, I'm happy with that. Okay, so now we're just going to wait for that to cure. Oh, wait a minute, sorry, got one more thing to do. Got to put our engine block in. Okay, there we go. Now we let this dry, and I'll tell you what, we're going to go ahead and make use of that epoxy, and we're going to glue in our the rear of our nose cone here. Nope, no we're not. That's not going to be. We're going to need new epoxy. That's already starting to get too hard. So that goes on the wayside. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and cut the little notch in this centering ring for the Kevlar line to sit in, to pass through. And it's just easier to do it before you glue that on. That's perfect. Alright. So I don't know if you can see that. I just cut a little tiny notch in that for the string to sit in. Okay, so let's go ahead and we can tie our loop here. So we're not doing that while the glue dries. Our straight razor blade here cuts Kevlar a little easier. Okay, that's good. Alright, now let's go ahead and get our glue mixed up. Okay. Alright. So let's go ahead and glue our end cap into our nose cone first. Okay. Happy with that. Okay, so now we're going to take our fin unit here and install this like so. So we're going to put a little epoxy in here. Okay, so now we're going to put that through there without getting a lot of epoxy on there. And you know what? We want to put that between two fins. You want to make sure your engine hook is kind of, doesn't have to exactly center between two fins, but sort of centered between two fins. Just looks better. Okay. We got that in. And it looks straight. So now that we have that on, we'll go ahead and put on our aft centering ring here. Sorry, keep wanting to pull things off the camera view. I apologize for that. Okay. Now we let that dry. Just as a tip, denatured alcohol or isopropyl alcohol will cut through epoxy, when it's sticky and wet, pretty well. So it's good cleanup medium for that. Okay, we need one more batch of epoxy here to glue down our shock cord. Okay, that's looking pretty pretty good for that. Okay, and then we're going to feed this back down through the hole. Okay, so what I'm doing here is just making sure that line is glued down into our little groove that we cut into the centering ring. And I'm going to hold this taut until that sets up. Okay, so we have our finished motor mount installation and fin unit, and it's all integrated. And so now all we have to do is install this into the body tube. And so the way we're going to do that is we're going to go ahead and put a bead of epoxy inside the body tube at the distance that this is from the fin unit. Then we're going to slide our fin unit in part way, just like that. And then we're going to take this little tool that I just kind of fabricated with this little 90-degree little hook on it, just a little bend on it. And we're going to take epoxy and we're going to apply it to the underside of the body tube. And the reason we want the body tube, the reason we want to do that is because when we press it down, we don't, if we put the epoxy around the fin unit, it would ooze out as the tube slid onto the end of the fin unit here. But if we put it inside the tube, it just pushes it up into the tube. So it's just a little less messy. It's a little more trouble because we got to go through this rigmarole, but in the end it gives you a cleaner look. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. Get a fairly good amount of epoxy. Okay. Get our mixing stick. Now with this, you only got 5 minutes, so you kind of got to work a little quick. You don't want to dally. You don't want to rush it, but you don't want to make a big globby mess. But we don't want to take too much time either. In fact, if I had any 12-minute epoxy, I probably would have used that. 12 minutes actually a nice working time for epoxy. Okay, so set that over there. I've got the distance marked on the stick here that we want to apply the glue at. So we're just going to go ahead and get some on our stick and put her in. That's pretty good for that. Go ahead and get our tube partway in there. Wipe off our stick. Now we'll go with the other end. I almost didn't get enough here. In fact, I'm going to be a little shy on epoxy here, but that's okay. Oh dear. And I'm going to be making kind of a mess here on the tube because I'm so shaky. But as long as it's not on the outside of the tube, that's what I'm not wanting to avoid here. I don't want to waste any. Okay. Alright, so we scrape some onto there. I'm getting it on the outside of the tube anyway. Wipe a little bit of that off first. Alright. Okay. Alright. I'll take my napkin here and wipe that off where I got it on the outside. Okay. Now we just slide her on. And we are good. Nice clean joint, no glue. Stand her up and let her dry. Just like that. And again, that will be a lot easier if you don't have a trimmer. Alright, so maybe while that's drying, we will do the last step here for construction. Go ahead and tie our shock cord on here. Okay. Cut that off there. Okay. So you see all I did there was I just tied the shock cord onto our Kevlar harness. Alright, so that is it for the basic construction. I'm going to go ahead and feed this back up through the rocket body now. And we'll tie off our shock cord onto our nose cone. If I can get this to go through. There we go. Oh, hooked onto the engine hook there. Okay. Alright, so there we have that. So then we take this other end and we pass it through our screw eye. And we give ourselves plenty of room. You always want to give yourself kind of a long shock cord so you have room to do all this stuff here, because we got to pass the nose cone through our knot like so. Oops, what did I do? I messed that up. There we go. Okay. And we got a little bit of extra there. We'll cut that off. Okay. Alright, so now we can put all this stuff back in to our tube. For now. This isn't how you would pack it for a flight, I'm just trying to get it cleaned up here. Bench. Okay. Alright, there we go. So that's going to finish construction of the Estes Challenger 1. The next phase will be decals, and for that we need to go over to the computer and download the decal file, the image file for the decals, and then what we're going to do is concentrate a little bit on showing how to get the decal sizing right. Now we have a 0.098 inch diameter body tube for the Challenger 1. With paint and primer, I'm going to go ahead and round that up to 1 inch diameter body tube. And yeah, we'll go ahead and talk about how we get the decal sizing right when we get over to the computer.
Okay, so when we're looking for decals, the first thing we're usually going to do is to go check out Jim Z's website. It's by far your best chance of locating a decal for an old kit, and also what Jim often does is he will give you a measurement, like a ruler or something, in the scan, so that it makes it very easy to size the print for the decal correctly. However, if we look through this list for Estes, in fact, we can do a Control F up here and look for Challenger. As you can see, we're not going to find anything. It's got 0 hits. So unfortunately, the Challenger 1 is not um, featured on Jim's website. So we're going to have to go look elsewhere. So we're going to go back to Google, and we're going to type in Challenger 1, or Estes Challenger 1 decal. And when you do that, you're going to see a few different hits. The one we want to start with is this one that says decals and templates yield rocket plans at rocketshop.com. We're going to go there. Your webpage will look like this. I'm going to make this a little bigger for you. So you'll see this listing here with different decals listed here. You're going to scroll about halfway down, and maybe a little more than halfway down. You'll see Challenger 1 and Challenger 2. So we want the Challenger 1 decal. Another contribution of John Brom. Thank you, John. And that downloaded a TIFF file. So we're going to open that TIFF file, and there we have it. There we have the Estes Challenger 1 decal. But one thing I want to, and you could go ahead and use this decal. It's very usable. One thing about it, though, that I noticed is that if you kind of zoom in, you will see that the Challenger lettering is not very crisp. I don't know whether that was from a low-resolution scan or an artifact of conversion from one format to another, JPEG to TIFF, I don't know. So at any rate, if you printed this out at the scale of the rock, where it would be 1-to-1 for the decal, it would probably look okay. Or you could just clean this up if you wanted. But I happen to know that there's a better one out there. But we are going to keep this. So we're going to save this to the desktop. So you just do a file, make a copy, or save it to your desktop. This is in the download folder, so you can go get it out of your downloads when you click on it. And just bring it over to your desktop. I already have a copy there, so I'm not going to do that. But anyway, going back to Google, the other one that we're interested in is the one right above it, and that's the Estes Challenger 1 decal redrawn and upscaled. So if we click on that one, we get to, oops, let's go to this one, the main one. And you're going to get this archive forum format. You're going to click on this View Full Version Estes Challenger 1 decal redrawn and upscaled. That's going to take you to the actual forum entry, and here is the decal right here, the JPEG for that decal. So we'll finally open it here. And as you can see, he's got a BT50 version and then a BT60 version. We aren't interested in the BT60 version, obviously, though it wouldn't really matter which one you use here because you're going to scale either one. But we'll start with the BT51 because it's going to be closest to the original. And one thing I wanted to point out here is if we go ahead and zoom in, I don't know if you remembered what the last one looked like, but see how this one's much cleaner and crisper. And so we want to use this one over the other one. However, notice that the bars that go on the bottom of the rocket near the fin section are not included, and the Estes logo is not included. We only get the Challenger 1 wrap for this one, but that's all we needed because our other decal had the other things, and they were pretty sharp. So what we want to do here is save this one off as well to your desktop, and once you've done that, I'm going to pull over the files that I saved. Okay, I'm just working on another monitor here. So alright, so once you have these two files on your desktop, we're going to go ahead and we're going to open first we're going to open this one, and you could use whatever GIMP, whatever photo manipulation program you want. But you can use GIMP, Corel Draw, Photoshop. But for what we're going to do here, you really only need Paint. And so if you don't own any of those, or I know GIMP is free, but if you're not proficient in GIMP, it's a little more complicated. You can just do these really simply with Paint. And because all we're going to be doing is kind of constructing, kind of replacing that Challenger 1 with the Sharp one. So so the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and right click, open with Paint. All right, and then we're going to kind of bring that down, and then we're going to go up here to our select. We're going to grab this. We're going to Control X to cut. Then we're going to close this. Or rather, we're going to just open another one. And we're going to open the Challenger 1 decals TIFF file. And we don't need to save that one. Okay, so once we have that open, what we want to do is we want to pull this, we want to pull this out to make room. And then we're going to do a Control V, and then we're going to bring that over, and you can see the scale is quite different. And that's fine. We don't really care about that. All right, so then we're going to put that there. We're going to kind of zoom out a little bit. Let's see here. Yeah. All right. Sorry, don't mean to strobe you there. Okay, so now after we do that, we are going to want to make sure we get this Challenger 1 over here to be the size of this one. So we're going to go ahead and grab it again. Now this is important. Once you have this selected, you want to right click. I'm sorry, you don't want to right click. You want to click resize, and you want to use percentage, and you want to make sure this box is checked, this maintain aspect ratio. Because what happens is if we were to just do this, oh, let's bring it up here, it's just going to squish it, and then you're going to kind of, oh, we'll bring that in here, and then you're guessing. You don't know, you might lose the you're going to lose your proportions there. So so what we want to do here is we're going to go ahead and again grab it. We're going to resize. We're going to make sure that box is checked. And I don't know, we'll go maybe 50%. Looks like it's about double. We'll start there. Okay, that was probably a little too small. So we'll Control Z that. And resize, we'll try 60%. We'll see where that puts us. 60%, not quite. So you can just keep playing with this until you get it to be about the right size. Nope. And all right, so let's do resize. We'll do 90% here. We'll do 95. Okay, and we'll do 95 again, or 90. Yeah, we'll try 95 again. Okay, that's got us pretty darn close there. So now, what I want to do is to get us zeroed in perfect. I'm going to bring this guy and just move him over here. Oh, I always do that. Let's lose it. Okay, sorry. We're going to bring him over here. We're going to line them up there. And okay, so now we're going to grab this one and we're going to go like 99% here because we can get this pretty close, I think. A little closer anyway. Just keep hitting 99 until we're pretty close to the kind of zero in on it. I think one more ought to do it. Perfect. Okay. Now we have our decal that is exactly the right size, very close. So we're just going to now grab him and put him in place over here. Okay. We are not interested in that, so we can Control X that. We can get rid of this now because we're done with it. It's our low resolution one. And for these guys, I think we can probably move them up here. Let's do this. Let's rotate them and put them kind of here. I think we can save a little room here. Rotate. Okay, we have to. Okay, so for this, if you want to move him in really tight here, we'll just instead of using the box select, we'll use the freeform selection here, and we'll just kind of grab it a little bit closer to the. Okay. All right, so once you have that, what I do is, what I want to do, we'll go back to our box select here. I like to have, like when I print a decal, I like to have multiple copies of it. So let's go ahead and copy this. Oops. Control C, Control V, and we're going to copy that. Oh, copy that over here, and then we need to pull this down just a tad. So we're going to pull that down a little bit, and we're going to copy it one more time, and we'll make 4 sets of this. So we'll have a nice set of backup decals. If they get scratched when you're flying them, or when you're putting them on, one rolls up on you. You have a backup set. So, okay, so once you have that, we can go ahead and save this, and we're good to go. So we're done with paint now. We can go ahead and exit paint, and now that we have that, we want to print it. So to print, you can just use the default printing for photos. You can right-click on your photo. I'm sorry, select it, right-click on it, hit print, and then what we want to do is we want to fit picture to frame. We don't want that, because what fit picture to frame will do is that just scales everything up to fit, and we want to be exact. So make sure you uncheck fit picture to frame. We're going to go over here to options, printer properties, and then when you get to printer properties, you're going to go to this page setup tab, and when you first go here, it'll probably say fit to page. You're going to want to go over to scaled, and then you're going to want to print at 100% and hit print. And when that print comes out, it's going to be out of scale. It's going to be probably too large. And I'll give you a little, like this is when I printed mine, this is what I got. So what I did was I measured, if you can see this, I measured that, and it was 4.9 inches on mine. Now your numbers are going to be different. Mine was 4.9. Yours might be 3.7 or 5 or whatever. It's going to be a number. And so what's the number we want? We know that this wrap here, if we're looking at it, let's go back to our real quick here. Let's open this up real quick. We can just open it again with paint real quick. So we know that this wrap here needs to wrap around our body tube exactly one time. And we have a BT50, which Estes lists as 0.98 inches in diameter. Now we figure we've got primer and paint on that tube, so let's go ahead and round it up to 1 inch in diameter, which makes the math easy, because if we're looking for the circumference, we're going to multiply by pi, which everybody knows is 3.14, and 1 inch, or 1 times 3.14 is 3.14. So we know that we want our wrap, theoretically, to be, or the Challenger 1 here, to be 3.14 inches in length. And so like from this corner down to this corner, we want that to be 3.14. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and bump it up a little bit more, because you want just a little bit of overlap maybe. So we'll make it 3.15, just a tiny bit. So given that, we don't need to save this, sorry. Okay, so we're going to pull up our calculator, and we need to find out what scale, what percentage to print at, what scale percentage to print at. So I'll use my numbers as an example. So I had 4.1 or 4.9 inches. Or, oops, excuse me. I want 3.15. I'm making here. Sorry. I want 3.15, and then you want to so you want the dimension you want, and then you want to divide it by the dimension you're at, and what that's going to give you is the scale factor. And for mine, it's 64.2%. You aren't, the print program only allows you to use whole percentages, so we're just going to round that down to 64%. So you're going to go ahead into your right-click, print. Again, we're going to uncheck Fit Picture to Frame, go to Options, Printer Properties, Page Setup, and now instead of 100, we'll print at 64%. And you'll print that. And when you print that, again, your numbers might be different, but when I printed mine, I got this, which is exactly 3.15 inches. So that worked out really well. Once you have that printing at the correct size, and by the way, all these test prints you're going to want to do on plain paper. Obviously, you don't want to use your decal paper. So just do all these test prints on plain paper. Then once you get it printing at the correct size, you can load up your decal paper, and then go ahead and print that out. So I've already done that. I use a Canon Pro 100 printer. It's a high-end photographic printer. But you always want to use the settings. So this is the decal, the actual decal I got. And I want you to notice how dark that black is. That's really nice. I was really happy with the way that came out. And that's one of the advantages of using a high-end photo printer for your decals. You're always going to want to, when you print, here, let me go back in here for a second to print. You always want to have the quality set on high and glossy photo paper for decal paper. What the high quality does is that lays down the maximum amount of ink, and that's what you're wanting. You don't want the color to be thin. So so yeah, that's what the print quality high, obviously glossy photo paper. and you're going to be happy with your result. So now that we have our decals, we can head back over to the workbench and finish up our Challenger 1 build.
Okay, so we're ready for the final step here, which is decals. And I went ahead and cut out the decals already, so they're all ready to go. So what I'm going to do is I'll bring the camera in a little bit closer. I'm not sure how this is going to go. I've kind of had trouble with this decal paper. I don't know whether it's going to cooperate or not. So hopefully it does, and this doesn't turn into a very tedious exercise. But we won't know until we give it a shot. So let's get this thing done. Alright, I'm going to start with the hardest one first. That's going to be this large Challenger 1 wrap-on. And we're going to go ahead and put the decal in the water. It's going to immediately roll up on me. Not too bad. Kind of want it to not roll up too bad. Keep it open there. Oh, here it comes. It's off the paper already. Okay, whoa, that was quick. That was very quick. Alright. Challenger 1 goes in the upward direction. And the edges are already rolling up. Man, these decals. Okay, wrap it around. Pull that off. Okay, well the size is good. Get that unrolled. Okay, that could have gone a little worse. Also could have gone a little better. But it's on. And now I just have to get it to lay down. Lay down, lay down. Alright. Well, still not impressed with this paper. I mean, that could have gone worse, but it's still just, it's not quite as smooth as just putting on a regular decal from a kit. Okay, so now that that's down, we're going to try to use our Q-tips here to get that edge sealed. What's happening here is you can't see it because the camera's, it's away from the camera, but the end of the decal is trying to lift. It doesn't want to stick down, and it's sticking now. So hopefully that looks pretty good. Alright, we're just going to kind of go over this and wick off a little bit of the extra water. And oh dear, we got a big kink there. Well, that's, I knew things were going too well. Okay. Had a bit of a bubble there. I think it's going to be okay though. And I'm going to pull that even again. Oh, come on. Don't, there we go. Okay. And down you go. Alright, I think we're going to probably just really hope for the best on that one. I want to pull it down, but I don't want to jar the decal. Don't want to make it go crooked. It's good, it's straight. is sticking. Alright. Alright, I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, so let's go ahead and press our luck and go for the other wrap on. Put that one in the water here. This is the stripes that go on the bottom, very close to the bottom. If we look at our chart, they're going to go very close to the bottom here. Alright, just a little bit. Hold it open so it doesn't totally curl up on itself. Half the battle with this paper is not letting it curl up too bad in the water, and then be ready because it does separate quickly. It separates a lot quicker than a kit decal. Alright, I'm just going to try to get that off. Whoa, get back on there. Okay. Alright, I'll try to pull that around. Rotate and pull. Rotate and pull. Alright. Okay, it's on. So we can get it straightened up now. We are. Ooh. That one's not sized real great. I'm gonna live with it, but you should have test fit that a little bit. Two of those lines aren't exactly the spacing is very uneven on one of the lines. Tell you what though, it'd be a good place for the launch lug. If we center that, we could probably hide that with the launch lug. So this rocket might get a launch lug because we need to hide a flaw in the decal. Okay. Alright, that one's on. Alright, that looks good to me. How's this one doing over here? Alright. Okay. There's that one. Now we just got the two Estes to worry about. And I think for these, I am going to just dip them. These line up with the fin. that's already coming off. The Estes goes up. And it gets centered. Fin. That looks pretty good. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So in the middle and centered on one of the fins. Alright. So one down, three down, one to go. This is going actually much quicker than I thought it was going to go. So we're going to rotate that 180 degrees. And we'll do the same thing with this decal. Again, I'm just going to dip it, hold it underwater for a few minutes, or a few seconds, not a few minutes, yeah. A few seconds. It's all these this decal paper, like really about 10 seconds and it's wanting to come off. Yeah, it's ready to come off already. Okay, so alright, that's down. Okay, let me line that up. That one looks pretty lined up. Yep. I'm happy with that. Just going to straighten it just ever so slightly. There we go. Alright. Okay, well, I will do a quick, that's it for the decals. So now we're going to let these dry, and I might put a coat of Solvaset over the top of them to just, you know, snug them down just a little bit. But there it is. There's our Challenger 1. Looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with how that came out. So the very last step will be putting the gloss coat on it, and we'll come back for that in a little bit. We're going to probably let these dry thoroughly, and again I might snug them down with a little bit of the Solvaset, which is this stuff right here. Really good. You get the model railroading from Waller's. It's the best stuff. So a little bit strong, and it might crinkle your decal at first, but don't panic. That just means it's working. When it's all dried and all settled down, everything will be flat and smooth. So, so first I'm going to let them dry, put a little coat of this over them. Then once that's all done, then we'll come back and we'll do our final step, which is to put the future gloss coat over the final rocket. Alright, so the last step in our construction is going to be putting our future gloss coat over the rocket and the decals to seal them in. And to do that, as last time, we're just going to pour a little bit of this future in a cup. I'm going to apply this by brush. Again, you can airbrush this on, it's just a little more trouble. I don't think for this rocket we need to worry about airbrushing, because we're just going to put kind of a healthy coat of it on and let it dry. If you recall the X-ray, we had the acrylic paint for the trim. that would have been a good idea to airbrush on, because by brushing it on, I was actually starting to, the acrylic gloss coat was actually starting to attack the paint a little bit. So all we're going to do here is, but we don't have any acrylic paint on this, so we're good to just brush it on this time, and it's easier to do that. So here we go. This shouldn't take very long. I'm going to go quick, but I'm going to be kind of sparing with it up on the nose cone. And the reason is you don't want to let too much gloss coat seep into the seam between the nose cone and the body tube, or else it'll kind of glue it shut, and you don't want that. So we're going to kind of just dab it on a little bit sparingly on the nose cone. Try not to let too much of it drip down. It's going to drip a little bit because it's very thin stuff. That's good. So now I'm going to just try to kind of take it down the side of the rocket. I still call this stuff future, even though it hasn't been called future for a number of years. I think everybody in the hobby industry still thinks of it as future. Future floor care. Basically just a very inexpensive acrylic gloss. It works very well, it's very forgiving, and it's very inexpensive, comparatively speaking. A little too much on the brush here. Future self-levels very well. That little corner of the decal coming up there. Stick it back down. Again, I really wasn't too happy with this decal paper. Still am not. I don't know that I'm going to use the rest of it. It was, it's just never laid down really correctly. It bubbles, it wrinkles, it stretches. It's just not the best. So I have asked around and got another brand that I'm going to try on the next rocket. Hopefully that goes better. Okay, so I think once you get to a certain point, it's just going to kind of all run down, and then you just kind of want to collect the excess off the bottom. And the trick is to just leave it alone so that you don't start putting brush streaks in it as it's drying. Which is sometimes the hardest thing to do, to just leave it alone. And let it dry. Alright. Alright, I think that's got it. So we'll go ahead and clean our brush and let this dry overnight, and then we'll come back with some final thoughts. Okay, so that's going to do it for our Estes Challenger 1 build. We did a full clone from scratch using only off-the-shelf parts that you could buy through the Estes catalog or online at eRockets. We printed our own decals. We 3D printed the fins and the nose cone, which are out of production, and as you can see, they look almost indistinguishable from the original Estes part. So I'm pretty happy with the way this rocket came out. In terms of lessons learned on the decals, again, I'm just not really sold on the paper I have. I have bought another brand of paper that was recommended on a couple of the forums, and I'm going to give that a try, and if that works out better, I'll definitely be sharing that. But in fairness, I didn't do all the steps I could have done to maybe help the paper. I didn't go ahead. I could have used the micro set before I put the paper down. Maybe that would have helped them snug down a little bit. I have heard. I've used this on plastic models with pretty good success. I really didn't think it was going to be necessary on this really smooth, glossy, shiny tube, but maybe it would have helped. So that's on me. The micro saw, it is a little less aggressive than the Solvaset. This definitely is not compatible with the printer's jack decal paper. When I put this on the first batch, the decals actually kind of started to dissolve, much more than they should have. I mean, it's supposed to melt the decal a little bit down onto the surface, but this was actually like the edges of the decal were actually shrinking in and dissolving. So a little too aggressive. So I would not recommend this. However, this is slightly less hot, so perhaps this would have been a good choice to use. Again, I might try it in the future one more time on maybe a test project or something like that. But so yeah, that was about the only thing during this build that I felt like didn't really go that well. But in the end, I'm okay with the results. They're satisfactory. They're not perfect. You probably can't see the flaws in the video, but if you look really close, you can see a couple of areas where the decal isn't laying down smooth, and that's okay, good enough. One of the things I've had to learn as I get older, and again with my tremors and stuff, is don't let the good be the enemy, or don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. So so you have to just know when to leave it alone. Say, that's good enough. Not trying to achieve perfection here. So yeah, so that's going to be a wrap on this video. What's next? I took some time to decide this, and I think what I'm going to do next is we're going to fill a hole in my collection from high school. This was one of my favorite rockets that I had in high school. It's the Polaris, and it's a black and white picture here, but it's gold with white and blue stripes. So it's like a white body with blue stripes and then gold on the top and bottom. It's a beautiful paint scheme. And so this is my kit. This is a collector's item. I'm not going to open this. The Polaris is a very easily cloned rocket because it doesn't have any fancy molded parts or anything. Everything's pretty much obtainable. I have a set of decals I got from Excelsior before they shut their doors, and those are Alps print decals, so we shouldn't have any trouble with those. And yeah, so this will be a quick build. It's not there's nothing really new in this build. We're not going to be introducing any kind of new procedures or information or anything like that. It's just a basic 4 fins nose cone. This one has a payload section. Again, it should go pretty quickly, and we'll get started on that in just a couple weeks here. So look for this soon, and I promise after this, there might be one more. The next one I'm thinking of doing is a little it's still a simple rocket, but it's got a little more to it. Not much, but it's got a few extra things on it. And then after that, I want to get into some more elaborate rockets, maybe clone something sci-fi or something that would be a little more involved, might be a 2-part video or something like that. So anyway, this is next, and we will see you on the Polaris build video.